Brad Childress doesn't just like football, he loves football.
I did watch him. I was standing right behind him when he was warming up and saw him kind of reach for his groin and, hold it and whatever you do with the groin, rub it. That's what I think I witnessed. It twinged a little bit on him.
Football! Gotta eat! Courtney wanted us to play some best of Brad Childress off the top of the show. Mackey and Judd, Declan producing, Courtney Cronin from ESPN.com, and it is Purple Daily here on the Score North platform. We appreciate everyone helping us hit some record numbers on our YouTube page in the last month too. So if you haven't subscribed, youtube.com/Purple Daily Podcast, and also Apple, Spotify, and ScoreNorth.com. So do you ever wish that you covered Brad Childress, Courtney Cronin?
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard some great stories over the years about him, the Mike Tice years.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely wish I would have been around for that. That would have been, those mid 2000s years, like 2000 years, right? The mid 2000s, whatever. Like, all of the nonsense that happened with this team, like what's going on here, infinitely, but all the stuff I just remember, like growing up and being in high school and being like, they did what on a boat, and like all this, all this other stuff that like just happened under the watch of Brad Childress and others. That was. I definitely would have loved to have been around. I mean, Seifert's told me some good stories. Would love to have been around to witness some of that myself.
They not only did what you heard they did on the boat, but they partially got in trouble and got caught because they allowed the high school students who were like the servers to be the servers on the boat to watch what they were doing. So like kids your age, put yourself back then and you're getting Diet Cokes, right? Or Cokes or something for a bunch of adults who are doing things that belong in a pornographic film. That's what they did.
I love how they thought enough to fly the entertainment in from Atlanta, but they didn't think enough to get like little 16-year-old Billy, the server kid, the busboy. Just like, why don't you take the night off work, Billy? Here's $100. Go to the movie store.
The great Burke line of all time. What's wrong with our strippers? Why you got to fly them in? What's wrong with Minnesota strippers? He said, I'd be very offended if I were a stripper in the state right now.
That Burke, everybody. Anywho, all right, let's get to our confidence, concerns, and curiosities for this week's Vikings game against the Houston Texans. And Declan, you fire up some appropriate music here.
Football.
We'll start with Courtney R. Cronin. What is the thing that you are the most confident in going into this game on behalf of the Vikings?
I am confident that Dalvin Cook is going to have another massive day because they can't stop the run in Houston for anything. Like, their front is terrible. I don't know if it's like injuries or what it is. The guys look stiff. I mean, ever since that Clyde Edwards-Helaire debut on that Thursday night football game, like, they have not looked good at all. I mean, they allow, another 100-yard rusher, I can speak, last week to James Conner in Pittsburgh. And I just think that they're going to have a lot of trouble containing Dalvin Cook. And as we saw, like, the best attributes that you can bring out of Kirk Cousins come from setting up the run game. So you can establish play action. You can establish all these rollouts and changing where he's throwing the ball from. And that's got to be the key to what you do. So I'm confident we're going to see another 100-plus yard day. I don't know if it'll be 181 again, but like another really big day for Dalvin Cook that's going to set up everything else that he do offensively.
Courtney is exactly right. So, but I had that one, but I will change to this because I think it's now official. I don't think it was a fluke, and I think that he has arrived. Justin Jefferson is going to have a big game. He might not have a huge game, but Justin Jefferson, what we saw in the loss to the Titans, he's too damn good now to be like, well, we ignored him this week. Eureka. You see that? So my second confidence now is that in every game for the rest of this season, Justin Jefferson is either going to thrive or the opposing team is going to have to account for him big time to take him away. But I don't think that was a one-game pop-up. I think that Jefferson has officially arrived and is now a big part of this offense, or at least he better be.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Courtney and lockstep there. Just 'cause Dalvin Cook absolutely went off against Tennessee. I mean, we all know how bad the Texans defense is, and Cook feasted on the Titans last week, and he's quietly still having a very productive year. And even though he was slow to get off the gates in the first 2 weeks, he was still a big part of the offense. And if everything has to click on it, it has to go through Dalvin Cook. So I'm gonna guess Dalvin Cook absolutely runs all over the Texans on Sunday.
All right, we're all sort of speaking the same language here. I'm gonna go back to the same well that I went to last week. I am confident that Kirk Cousins is going to have himself a game. And I was sort of right last week, except for the pick six that he tried to throw, if not for the dumb defensive, like the crackback block and then the disaster final drive. Like if you sort of take away those things, Kirk Cousins was pretty effective in that game last week, as he would tell you at the Zoom podium afterwards. When you score 30 points and go for 400 yards, I mean, defense, that should be enough to win the game. I think I'll add a couple more stats to the pile here. According to Pro Football Focus, the Texans defense is bottom 5 in pressure rate. So they're just not getting to quarterbacks. And they're also, in terms of secondary grade, they are 30th in coverage, I believe, or like 27th. They're in the bottom 5. So they're not getting to quarterbacks, and their secondary is not able to hold on. And Kirk Cousins now has 2 great receiver weapons to throw to. And so I don't expect this to be a game in which the Vikings struggle to get to like 24 points. Concerns. Courtney Cronin, pick from any number of things in the bag of concerns, the thing that you are most concerned about for the Vikings.
Well, we talked about this this Tuesday on the show. And Kirk even mentioned it yesterday. I don't think it's kind of like, you get a minute 47 or whatever. The drive, technically, I think started minute 47. It was 1:44 by the time that they were gifted the roughing the passer penalty. It's like, yeah, you should absolutely be able to get into field goal range. Like, yes, Kirk, but you didn't do it. And I have a feeling this game could come down to another shootout, like where the defenses can't stop anything. As we know, like the Texans defense is not very good. The Vikings defense certainly is kind of in that same boat, a work in progress, giving up the big plays there in the second half. But they look pretty good, decent, holding them to 9 points. Titans, 9 points in the first half off field goals. But if Kirk is tasked with orchestrating a game-winning drive in Houston, can he do it? That is my concern, because I'm just not so sure. We haven't seen it. We've seen it happen once. And like you're doing it now on the road. We've only seen him do it against Denver at home. And we saw what happened even last week. I don't think protection on the offensive line is that much better, unless all of a sudden they're going to start somebody new at right guard. I don't know how that's going to fare. So that would be my coaching point if I'm Bill O'Brien, if I'm like Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator down in Houston. Try to exploit that weakness of Kirk with pressuring, getting some pressure up front. And really particularly moving the pocket for him, collapsing it as best as you can, especially in those 2-minute drills. It halts his ability to have any sort of 2-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute offense.
And that dovetails into my biggest single concern for the Vikings offense in this game. Who is going to and how are you going to account for J.J. Watt, who has not been great, but he's damn good.
Yeah.
And in a 3-4, my question is he lined up against O'Neal? Do they try and slide him in a little bit to get him against, God forbid, Samia? And if that's the case, who helps Drew out? Does Cook have to stay in to chip more? I just think that Watt's going to be ticked off. He's good. I think he's got something like 2 sacks in 3 games, so it's not great yet. But this is going to be a matchup that the Texans, I'm sure, have spent the entire week trying to figure out how they're going to exploit it. And so my biggest concern is, do the Vikings even have the ability to stop him? I'm not sure the answer is yes. I do know that if the answer is yes, they're going to have to get more creative than just saying, Drew Samia, go to it, good luck, because that would be a disaster.
Yeah. A one-on-one situation there is asking for a very long day for Cousins.
Sean
and
Mannion.
for Samia, but most for Cousins, yeah.
Sean Mannion plays if they do that. Write that down.
Oh, man. I have big concerns that Deshaun Watson's going to pop off and absolutely carve up the Vikings after going 0-3 so far. He had a really good game against Pittsburgh, and they're in striking distance in that one. And with Houston 0-3 and having high expectations this year and being at home, and there are going to be some fans too, I believe, obviously in the stands at Houston too. I have concerns that this is going to be kind of like the coming out party for Deshaun Watson, who's played well in all 3 losses, but I'd be concerned that he's just going to carve up a young Viking secondary.
I'm concerned about that too. I'm going to pivot off of that one. That was my number one concern, Dex. I mean, look at him at home. He had a few games at home last year where if you give him a home game and a bad defense to carve up, like last year, 426 and 5 touchdowns at home against Atlanta, they scored 50 points. Home against Oakland with a bad defense last year, 279, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 70% completions. He also did it against a good New England defense at home last year for 234, 3 touchdowns. Like, he's liable to go for 250, 300, a bunch of touchdowns and run for some yardage. But the thing I'm most concerned about, especially as we watch the entire week of Josh Allen praising Stephon Diggs for his leadership and just for being such a great addition, I am concerned that the Vikings don't have the guy or the leader in that locker room that they had with Stephon Diggs last year, either in game or during the week, that can say, it stops now. And Stephon Diggs did that a couple times. He did it. I mean, you could argue that leaving the team for a couple of practices, like in the beginning part of October, wasn't the best thing to do. And that popping off, on the sidelines in that Denver game. But you know what? His leadership was effective. And I think you're seeing it play out in Buffalo. Who's the person, if they get off to a bad start, who's the person that's going to pull everyone together and say, hey, and it can't always be a coach. It oftentimes has to be a player. Kirk Cousins isn't that guy. Who is it? That's my biggest concern. Who is it, Courtney? Is there anybody that you can point to say, all right, Diggs is gone, but this person's going to speak up? Adam Thielen can be that sometimes, but who else?
Eric Kendricks, maybe. Who else? I mean, Harrison Smith is excellent, and he leads by example, but he's not your vocal, in-your-face leader. Like, they don't have that guy. I mean, Kendricks is really the only person I can think of, at least in the defense right now, that has the clout to be able to do that offensively. Dalvin, maybe go ahead and step into that role. Like, you are one of the faces of this franchise. Go ahead and act like it. If it's presented to you, like that is your team, take it, because no one else is. I think that those are probably my only 2 options.
Yeah. Slim pickings on a 53-man roster. All right, the thing that you are the most curious to see this weekend, Courtney.
Couple things. I'm going to start with the COVID results that come out from Friday's testing and Saturday's testing, and then what happens when they do the point-of-care testing on Sunday. We know that the NFL has put out some new protocols because of what happened with the Tennessee situation, where the Vikings will receive some of those test day of game because they haven't been doing that yet. Eric Sugarman said that the sweet spot for positive cases would be the 3 to 5 day range, which is why Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were going to be so important for the Vikings. As of now, everything is scheduled to go. They will be getting on the plane on Saturday. They'll be flying down to Houston and playing the game on Sunday. But are they still kind of like white knuckling this in a way, thinking, okay, like, we're not out of the clear yet? Like, what happens if they have a bunch of people pop up from Friday's test going into Saturday? Like, it's just a really scary, slippery slope, I think, for any team to be dealing with. So that's one. It's like they're not out of the woods yet on this. So that's one curious thing. The other one, it's like, what's Irv Smith doing? Yeah. Like, he played 55% of snaps last week. I had someone comment on my Twitter, like, I put the snap count. They're like, Irv playing 36 snaps, whatever it was, is criminal. Like, is it, if he didn't run the right route and if he's getting these bad penalties that, are killing drives? So, like, I want to see more from Irv Smith. And I'm curious, like, what is it going to take for him to perform at a level where he's going to be an active member of this offense? Because he didn't get a target thrown his way last week. He literally had like a zeroed out stat line. So, curious as to like when the Irv Smith that we all know is a talented player, when does that guy arrive this season? Maybe it's week 4.
Do we think he is doing things wrong? Is that why here? Because, I mean, we've talked about this and where he's gone and why he's not used more. Do we think this is, Courtney, a starting point of Irv Smith is screwing up and so he's not being used?
I mean, I went back and watched the All-22. It looked like he ran the wrong route on several plays. That's all I'm going to say about it. Like, because maybe someone would tell me, oh, that's wrong. No, he ran the right. No, he didn't. Like, I think the best thing that he did last week, obviously, was the block that he had for Dalvin Cook's touchdown on the right side of the formation. But I think he's run the wrong routes, and I think the penalties have been drive killers, and coaches are subbing him. Watch the substitution patterns. Watch when he comes out. Watch what he does the play before. It usually has something to do with that.
My curiosity is going to be an ongoing one, but this week is as good a time to start as any, and it's this. Is Holton Hill good at football? Because, look, when it comes to Gladney or Dantzler, I get it. They're young. They're rookies. They're draft picks. It's going to take time. Holton Hill, I understand, doesn't have a ton of on-field experience, but he's in his third year now. He's been practicing for a long time. He's not a newbie to this league or this team. So what I saw last week concerned me because he looked lost way too much for a guy who shouldn't be consistently lost. So my question with the amount of playing time, because he is being given a lot of opportunity here, my question is very simple, and it can start being answered on Sunday. Are you good at football? Because if you're not, you know what you are? You're a long list of guys that we've seen in this town who guys like Mackey and Zulgad and Declan and Cronin in 5 years will be drinking a beer and laughing about, but they'll be long gone and we'll say, what happened to Asher Allen, Josh Robinson, Marcus McCauley? Is Holton Hill in that bin? Because I'm beginning to think that there's a chance he might be.
Yeah, if you had to,
he's going to play his way onto the bench. Like, that's going to happen here pretty soon, I think, because he looked, obviously had that pass breakup on their final drive with the one that set up the 55-yard field goal, but he has looked not like a player who should have earned as long of a leash that he had last season after he suspended himself for the first 8 games of 2019. Like, that's the thing. Like, this team gave you every single chance to pull it together. You have to start playing like it out there, because otherwise that is a waste of time and a waste of everyone's patience.
Yeah, that's the exact point I was going to make too. Is it's like you are so patient with this guy, and to watch this play out and him just be, I believe a perfect passer rating in the NFL is 158.3.
Correct.
And I believe I saw, according to PFF, that when opposing quarterbacks throw at Holton Hill so far this year, it's a 154 passer rating. So he is four points from allowing a perfect passer rating against this season. Yeah.
Yikes.
Declan, what are you most curious about?
I'm curious about Justin Jefferson, just because he finally popped off last week. He had 9 targets. He started, and after the first weeks of being quiet, I'm just curious to see if he can continue that and the Vikings will go his way. Obviously, he had a big coming out party that we compared it to Randy Moss in 98. We knew it was going to be kind of a long play too with Justin Jefferson replacing Stephon Diggs. You just can't plug and play someone, especially a rookie, to replace Justin Jefferson. But when he's been on the field, he's made a humongous difference. 12 catches, 10 first downs. He popped off last week. I just want to see if this can continue going forward and him not getting lost in the shuffle like he did in the first 2 games.
Yep. It would just be malpractice if he didn't get targeted like 8 to 10 times at this point. Just like find a way and just see what happens. The thing that I'm most curious about is to honestly just see where the season goes. I looked this up according to stathead.com. The last time the Vikings started the season, 0-5. And I say 0-5 not because, like, if they lose this game, it's 0-4 for the first time since, I think, 2011. And then they fought back a little bit in 2011 and won some games they shouldn't have down the stretch. But the only other time in franchise history that they've started 0-5, which they're staring down the barrel of if they lose this game and have to go to Seattle the next week, is 1962, everybody. That's the second year of this franchise's existence. So they were just an expansion team. And Vikings quarterbacks, including a very, very young Fran Tarkenton, combined to throw 31 interceptions that season with a 48% completion rate. So football was very different in 1962, but that's the only other time the Vikings have started 0-5, and that's what they're staring at these next 2 weeks if they don't get it together. So that would be that would be bad.
Get that draft pick,
or it would be good. It could be good. They've had a bunch of like 1-7, 1-8 kind of things, including, was it 2013 was another one of those clunker seasons.
Yeah.
But 0-5 has only been done once in franchise history. So, any final thoughts from you, Courtney, going into this game against the Texans?
Yeah, I think that, like we mentioned before, the desperation level is going to be up for both teams, because being in an 0-4 hole, like, I know that there are people writing off the season even after the Colts loss in week 2, but like 0-4 is essentially you're done, because it is so hard to climb out of that hole to get to the playoffs, even to get set to 7-9. I mean, like I mentioned, I think in the last episode, the only team that's been 0-4 to start in the Super Bowl era and made it to the playoffs is the 92 Chargers. So it literally has happened one time. And I think that it's like, okay, are we going to start to get the hard questions asked at that point of Mike Zimmer, of Rick Spielman, of this franchise? Does ownership start to get impatient at that point? That's the stuff. Like, you can chalk up 0-3 and be like, look, 3 bad games, 3 really difficult quarterbacks, a brand new secondary, every excuse or every legitimate excuse in the book too. But 0-4, you're like, we just lost a quarter of the season. There's 4 quarters of the season. We lost one of them.
Yeah.
That's not good. And so it's like you try to figure, okay, is there any sort of consequence for losing? I think we will start to find that out if they do indeed go 0-4.
The 1992 Chargers are just a really fun case study. So that's you brought it. It's the only 0-4 team. Bobby Ross was the head coach of that team. You know, they finished 11-5. They started 0-4. Mm-hmm. They started 0-4. They averaged like 9 points a game offensively in those first 4 games. They got in the 4th loss, they got shut out 27-0 at Houston. And then they turned it around. They won 11 out of their next 12 games, including a first-round playoff game against Kansas City. And then they finally got beat by the Dolphins in the divisional round of the playoffs. But that's probably not likely if the Vikings fall to 0-4 to follow that model.
No.
So you'll have to avoid it. All right, that's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily. We appreciate Courtney Cronin, who's ESPN.com Vikings reporter out at the Vikings practice facility right now. And we will see you for Ventline right after the game is over on Sunday, youtube.com/Purple Daily Podcast. Thanks, everybody.